Step 3. Creating the game concept. Once these objectives are clearly understood, your team can write them down on paper. At this point, you should reflect on your objectives and whether using a game to achieve these goals is the good way to go, or if you should use the other means. If you're still committed to designing a game, you can move on to Step 3, the development of the game concept. This step involves coming up with the idea behind the games. In coming up with the core concept for a game, there are essentially two options to start from. A. An existing game or game dynamic, which can be applied to the chosen topic. This is the most usual approach to take for novice designers. Or B. Create a concept from scratch, which is better left to those with more experience in designing and playing games. Option A. Using an existing game concept. If you decide on this approach, there are two places to start. With a particular game or with a particular dynamic. Starting with an existing game is called reskinning a game. If you have more time and a large group, 12 to 20 people, it can be fun to run a half-day workshop on creating a game using an existing game dynamic. Option A1. Reskinning a game. Reskinning is probably the most straightforward approach to designing games and a good starting point for those who are new to game creation and youth work. You start with a game you know and change it, one mechanic, dynamic or aesthetic at a time. Once you have clarified the objectives for your game, you can start brainstorming to identify an existing game which would help you to address those objectives. You might take Snakes and Ladders as a starting point, or Monopoly, Simon Says, Soccer, Fortnite, or the Game of Life. You can then begin to introduce new mechanics to encourage new dynamics, so for example, you can make it a collaborative rather than a competitive game. Consider changing the shape and design of the board. Remember, in Snakes and Ladders, the squares, 1 to 100, can be laid out in a straight, circular or spiral pattern following the curve of a road or a railway. An interesting thing to do is to scale up or scale down. A board game can be scaled up to life size to introduce physical movement, lots of creativity and fun. Option A2. Dynamic-driven design. If you want to take a more original approach, you can begin with an existing game dynamic rather than an existing game. This is best done as part of a day-long workshop as it does take some time, but it is fun and rewarding for the designers. Most games follow a defined core dynamic. There is a single thing that happens in the game. Snakes and Ladders is about racing to the end. Monopoly is about survival. Other dynamics could be territorial acquisition, where there is limited amount of space and players compete to own it. For example, this is the case in Carcassonne and Risk. Predictions. These are based on anticipating how your opponent behaves or how the mechanic of the game might work in your favor. Most card games are predictive, as it is something like rock, paper, scissors. Survival. In a game such as Monopoly, everything you do is to secure your survival, and so you always have this in mind when making decisions in the game. In contrast to survival games, in some games players set out to destroy resources in the game. These games are most likely to be based on themes of war or on the genre of computer games where monsters destroy cities like Nuclear War, the card game, or Rampage and Godzilla. Building is another dynamic found in Lego, Minecraft or SimCity. Chasing or evading. This is a very straightforward game dynamic which is seen in many field sports and in computer games, such as Pac-Man and Mario Bros, or in Scotland Yard, which is a board game which uses this core dynamic. Finally, you have the most straightforward core dynamic, race to the end. The first one home wins. Snakes and Ladders or car racing are examples of games that use this core dynamic. Decide on one or perhaps two complementary dynamics to use. This may be based on the objective of your project, the values you want the game to reflect, and the extent to which the group you are working with are familiar with games. Now you have to agree on a game concept. These are things you have to keep in mind. 1. How the game is played. 2. The game's story. 3. How the game is won. 4. How players move or progress in the game. 5. Any decisions players have to make during the game. 6. Good and bad things which can happen to players in the game and how they happen. Once these things are clear, you can start prototyping your game. With this prototype, you can present it to your colleagues or friends, ask for feedback and adapt it accordingly. Instead of option A, use an existing game concept, you can also go for option B, design an original game. In order to create an original concept, or your team should be familiar with games. It may also be useful to have advice from an experienced game designer. It is worth noting that as with any group creative process, this can be an intensive and formative experience for a team. Good communication throughout the process is essential. As mentioned earlier, there are two approaches you can take to the original game design: Blue Sky or Slow Boil design. Option B1, Blue Sky. Blue Sky designing refers to a process whereby you do the most creative thinking you possibly can that is not conventional and not grounded in today's reality. By doing this, you really think outside the box in problem solving and identifying solutions to your challenges, and then once you've vetted your creative ideas, it's time to reel them in to see what you can actually do now in the near term. In our next programs, we will take you through some techniques to help you think outside the box, with the do-it method or with flower associations. Option B2, Slow Boil design. This involves immersing the design team in the issue to be addressed. You give the team the issue and the context, for example, climate change in Kenya. The team learns everything they can over a prolonged period about the issue. It may take weeks or months for them to feel an original game idea emerge. Different members of the team pursue different avenues of investigation and come back to share what they have learned. Initially, when sharing their understanding of the issue, they are encouraged not to share game ideas. It is only when they have come to terms with the issue that they can begin exploring their game concepts.